his butt? Mr. Thomas replies, yeah, on his butt. Yeah, he landed on his butt here. He landed on his butt? Mm-hmm. But his head remained upright? Nah, I'm sure the investigator asks, I don't mean upright like he was looking at you, but I mean like his body remained upright. Mr. Thomas replied, I guess he was just limped over. I would say limped over. Then the investigator replies, okay. So when you think about the fact that he tore this off of him, and then his body just plops down and he leans forward, he's still sitting upright. So that does go to show that he was oriented in a position where he was seated directly upright. In terms of describing how he looked, the investigator asked, was he like completely purple? Because we've seen pictures of Epstein after the fact, and his face is completely purple in those pictures. Mr. Thomas says, no, he was, no, absolutely not. He wasn't completely, I'm going to skip down a little bit. It wasn't like he was red or blue or his lips were like a different color. It wasn't any of that stuff. He was just, and then if we scroll down a little bit further, Mr. Thomas says, it wasn't no discoloration of anything like that, if that's what you're trying to get at. And it's like he's basically saying it's almost like it just happened. The investigator says, all right, so it didn't look like there was much different than when he was alive. And he says, yeah, it didn't look like that. And if we scroll down a little bit further, the investigator asks, he actually seemed like he was alive? And Mr. Thomas replies, well, he didn't. I don't really want to say dead or alive because I was doing chest compressions. I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but I just kept going. I don't know if he was dead or anything at the time. So point being is the way he looked, it was not extremely obvious. His face was not purple. He was not even positive that he was dead at that time. He was just doing what he felt like he was supposed to do because from what he had said, he believed that he had been hanging right there. Now we're going to go over the interview provided by the medical examiner so you can see what his conclusions were based on what he observed. So his conclusion is that it was obviously a ligature that was used for a suspended hanging. And he describes in great detail exactly what you would observe. He said that the autopsy didn't show any real signs of struggle. That's something he's been very consistent on, and he has referenced that numerous times, that what you would see is if he was fighting, that there would be broken fingernails, that he said that for men, they're more pugilistic, they tend to punch each other more and that type of thing, and there was nothing obvious in that regard, and that added to his conclusion that this was, in fact, not a homicide. Look right here. He talks about fractures of his thyroid cartilage and one side of his hyoid bone. These are structures inside your neck, and the patterns of these fractures was consistent with a hanging. Now, all of these fractures and damage, the larynx, the voice box, it's shaped like a butterfly inside of your throat, has two horns at the top. So basically, he's saying that when it gets pressed against this, that if someone is in a suspended hanging, it will press their larynx against the back of their throat, and once again, creates all sorts of damage. And he's saying right here that the cartilage was actually fractured. So someone who just had the oxygen cut off versus someone who has damage from a physical suspension is going to look very, very different. Now, one thing that's clear throughout this is that it was never fully described the way that his body was found. So there was very limited information provided to the medical examiner, and he was actually provided with a fake noose. Nobody really knows where he got what he got. Nobody knows what it is, but it's most definitely not what was actually used. Now, in reference to the piece of fabric that was on the floor earlier that I talked about, he said, now I'm going to give you a close-up over here. This is like there was another noose that was laying at the scene. So this is the investigator talking about that piece and asking the medical examiner what they think about this. And he basically said what he was given was too tidy, couldn't have been it. The thing that was laying on the floor seems more likely probably what it was. But nobody still knows. There's still no full indication of whether or not that was even the noose. So it's never officially been recovered. But all of the determinations he came to were based on the fact that this was a suspended body. I'm curious if we could prove that there was, in fact, not enough room for it to have been fully suspended, if his determinations, if his decisions about all of this would, in fact, change.